My dad used me as a free babysitter for his new wife's kids every time I visited, while he spent hours bragging about his new family. When I confronted him about stopping child support payments, he yelled at me for being ungrateful. My 17F dad, Robert, 42M, has been slowly pushing me out of his life for the past 5 years, and I'm at the point where I can't pretend everything is fine. My parents split up when I was around 3 years old. The arrangement they worked out was that I stayed with my mom during the week and spent every weekend at my dad's place. For years, this setup worked perfectly. My dad and I had our own thing going. Every Friday after school, he would pick me up, and we had this routine we followed almost every single weekend. We would stop at the library and check out a stack of books, then head to this burger place he liked, and on Saturday mornings we would go to the farmer's market downtown. He taught me how to ride a bike in the parking lot behind his apartment building. We spent Sunday afternoons building things with his old tool set in the storage room. He showed me how to fix a leaky faucet when I was 8. Those weekends were the highlight of my week. My dad dated different women over the years, but none of them stuck around long. There was one woman named Delilah who he dated for about 18 months when I was 9, and I actually got along with her pretty well. She taught me how to braid my hair and took us to the aquarium once. But she ended up moving to another state for work, and that was that. After she left, my dad went back to his usual pattern of short relationships that fizzled out after a month or two. Everything changed when I turned 12. My dad met Grace, 39F, at some work conference. She had 3 kids from her previous marriage. Her oldest son Bryce was 14 at the time, her middle daughter Layla was 11, and her youngest son was 7. Within a month of them dating, Grace and her kids were staying over at my dad's apartment most weekends. My dad's place was a 2-bedroom apartment, so when they started coming around, suddenly there wasn't enough space for everyone. The first time I showed up for my weekend and found all of Grace's kids there, Bryce had already claimed the couch in the living room. Layla ended up sleeping in my room. My dad moved my bed against the wall and brought in a rollaway cot for Layla. My small bookshelf got shoved into the closet to make room for her stuff. I didn't say anything that weekend because I thought it was temporary. But it wasn't temporary. The next few months turned into a year, and Grace's family just became a permanent fixture. My dad married Grace when I was 13. He didn't tell me they were engaged. I found out they got married when I came over one weekend and saw wedding photos on the living room wall. He mentioned it casually while we were eating breakfast, like it was something I should have already known about. After they got married, my dad and Grace started looking for a bigger place. I thought this meant I would finally get my own space back. They found a 4-bedroom house about 20 minutes from my mom's place. When we went to see it before they moved in, my dad walked me through and showed me where everyone would sleep. Bryce got his own room because he was the oldest and a teenage boy who needed privacy. Layla and the youngest son would share one room. My dad and Grace would obviously have the master bedroom. That left one room, which my dad said would be the guest room and office. He told me I would sleep there when I visited, but during the week Grace needed it as her craft room since she made jewelry to sell online. I asked him where I was supposed to keep my stuff. He said I could use the bottom drawer of the dresser in the guest room and keep some things in a plastic bin in the garage. Meanwhile, Layla had an entire closet full of clothes and Bryce had set up his gaming computer in his room with a huge TV. The youngest son had boxes of toys stacked in the corner of the room he shared with Layla. My visits started becoming less frequent after that. Some weekends my dad would forget to call and confirm plans. Other times I would tell my mom I didn't want to go and she would let it slide. By the time I was 14, I was only going to my dad's house maybe once or twice a month. Around this time, Grace got pregnant. My dad called to tell me about it 3 weeks after they found out. The baby, a girl they named Sophie, was born in March last year. I didn't know she had been born until almost 2 weeks later when my dad mentioned it in a text message asking if I wanted to come meet my half-sister. When I went to visit, everyone was crowded around the baby and Grace's mom was there helping out. I sat on the couch for most of the visit. My dad handed me the baby for maybe 5 minutes and then Grace's mom took her back because Sophie started fussing. I need to mention my stepdad here because he's important to understanding why this whole situation with my dad bothers me so much. My mom started dating Carlos, 45M, when I was 6. They got married when I was 8. Carlos has been more of a father to me than my actual dad has been these past few years. Carlos is the one who helped me with my math homework every night when I was struggling in 7th grade. He's the one who drove me to bookstores and used record shops on weekends to help me build my collection of vintage vinyl. He learned how to make Brazilian cheese bread because I mentioned once that I tried it at a friend's house and liked it. Carlos has a daughter from his previous marriage named Isabel who is 21 now and lives across the country. I've only met her twice but Carlos talks about both of us like we're equally his kids. I've always called Carlos by his first name, never Dad. My real dad told me when I was younger that I shouldn't call anyone else Dad because it was disrespectful to him. I was maybe 6 or 7 when he said that, and it stuck with me. But Carlos never made an issue of it. He just showed up and did the work of being a parent without needing a title. Now back to my dad. The older I got, the more obvious it became that I didn't fit into his new family. My dad used to ask me about school and my hobbies. Now when I'm at his house, he talks at me instead of with me. He'll spend 30 minutes telling me about some documentary he watched about government surveillance or some article he read about the economy. If I try to bring up something I'm interested in, like a book I'm reading or a new album I discovered, he'll nod for a second and then change the subject back to whatever he was talking about. Last year I started getting really into photography. I saved up money from babysitting and bought a used camera. I've been taking photos around my neighborhood and posting them online. Some of them have gotten decent attention. When I told my dad about it, he said photography was a nice hobby but I should focus on more practical skills that would help me get a real job someday. Meanwhile, he paid for Bryce to go to some expensive basketball camp last summer even though Bryce isn't even that serious about basketball. He just plays on his school team for fun. The money thing is actually a huge issue. When my parents divorced, they made a private agreement without going through the courts. My dad was supposed to pay my mom a certain amount each month to help with my expenses. For the first several years, he paid it consistently. But sometime after he married Grace and they moved into the bigger house, the payments became irregular. Then they stopped completely about 2 years ago. My mom has brought it up with him multiple times but he always has an excuse. He said money was tight with the new house and Grace not working and all the kids' expenses. But I've seen the way they live. They go out to eat at nice restaurants. Grace gets her nails done every 2 weeks. They took a trip to Disney World last year and didn't invite me. My dad posted photos on social media of everyone at the park and I found out about the trip from those pictures. The reason I'm writing this now is because of what happened at my last visit 3 weeks ago. I hadn't been to my dad's house in over 2 months. He had been calling my mom asking why I never came around anymore. My mom told me I should go visit him and try to make an effort. She said he's still my dad and I'd regret it later if I completely cut him off now. So I agreed to go for the weekend. My dad picked me up on Friday afternoon. The drive to his house takes about 30 minutes. He spent the entire drive talking about his job and some disagreement he's having with his boss. He didn't ask me a single question about school or what I've been up to. When we got to his house, Bryce was in his room with his door closed. Layla was watching TV in the living room with 2 of her friends. The youngest son was playing with his toys in the hallway. Grace was in the kitchen cooking dinner with Sophie in a high chair next to her. My dad told me to put my bag in the guest room. When I opened the door, I saw that the room had been completely rearranged. The desk that used to be against the wall was now in the center of the room covered with Grace's jewelry supplies. The bed was pushed into the corner and there were storage boxes stacked at the foot of it. The dresser where I used to keep some clothes had been moved out completely. I asked my dad where I was supposed to put my stuff and he pointed to a small space on the floor next to the closet. Dinner that night was uncomfortable. Everyone sat around the table and my dad asked the other kids about their week. Bryce talked about his upcoming basketball game. Layla talked about some drama with her friends at school. The youngest son talked about a field trip his class was taking. When there was a pause in the conversation, I mentioned that I had submitted some of my photos to a local art show and 3 of them got accepted. My dad said that was nice and then immediately turned to Grace to ask what time Sophie's doctor appointment was next week. After dinner, my dad asked if I could watch Sophie for a bit while he and Grace went to the store. I said okay. They were gone for almost 2 hours. Sophie cried most of that time and I had no idea how to calm her down. When they got back, Grace took Sophie from me without saying anything and my dad made a comment about how I needed to learn how to be better with babies. The rest of the weekend was more of the same. My dad barely interacted with me unless he needed something. On Saturday, he asked me to help fold laundry. On Sunday morning, he left me at the house to watch Sophie and the youngest son while he took Bryce to basketball practice and Layla to her friend's house. I spent most of Sunday afternoon sitting in the backyard by myself because the house was too loud and chaotic. When my dad drove me back to my mom's house on Sunday evening, he told me I should visit more often. He said he missed having me around. But the whole weekend made it clear that I'm not really part of his family anymore. I'm just someone who shows up occasionally and gets put to work watching kids or doing chores. I told my mom when I got home that I don't want to go back. She said I was being dramatic and that my dad loves me. She said families go through rough patches and I need to be patient. But this isn't a rough patch. This has been going on for 5 years. I'm 17 now and I'll be 18 in 8 months. I've already started looking at colleges and filling out applications. My plan is to go somewhere far enough away that I won't be expected to come back and visit my dad regularly. I don't know if I'm wrong for wanting to just stop trying. My mom makes me feel bad about it. She says I'll regret pushing my dad away when I'm older. But I don't see how I'm the one pushing him away when he's the one who replaced me with a whole new family. I'm tired of being an afterthought. I'm tired of being treated like a guest in what's supposed to be my dad's house too. I just want to move on with my life and focus on the people who actually care about me. Update 1: I didn't expect to be updating this so soon, but things have escalated in the past few weeks and I need to get it out somewhere. A lot of people in the comments on my original post told me I should talk to my dad directly and tell him how I've been feeling about everything. Others suggested my mom should be the one to have that conversation with him since she's the adult. I decided to try both approaches. First, I talked to my mom about a week after I made my original post. I showed her what I wrote and explained that I was serious about not wanting to visit my dad anymore. She read through it and then closed my laptop and told me I was being too harsh. She said my dad has a lot on his plate with Grace's kids and the baby and his job, and I needed to understand that adults have responsibilities that take up their time and energy. I tried to explain that this wasn't about him being busy, it was about him treating me like I don't matter anymore. She said I was too young to understand how complicated adult relationships are. That conversation didn't go anywhere, so I decided to write my dad a message myself. I spent a couple of days working on it because I wanted to make sure I explained everything clearly without sounding like I was just complaining. I told him about how I felt pushed aside since he married Grace. I brought up specific examples, like the bed situation and the Disney World trip and how he never asks about my photography anymore. I mentioned the money situation too because my mom has been struggling to cover some of my expenses on her own and it didn't seem fair that he stopped helping out financially when he clearly has money to spend on Grace's kids. I sent the message on a Tuesday afternoon. He called me within an hour. I was in my room working on homework when my phone rang. I answered and before I could even say hello, he started yelling at me. He said I was being selfish and ungrateful. He said he's done everything he can to include me in his family and I'm the one who's been distant and refusing to visit. He said the only reason I brought up the money was because I'm greedy and only care about what I can get from him. He went on for several minutes about how hard he works to provide for his family and how I should be thankful he even makes time to see me with everything else he has going on. I tried to interrupt a few times to defend myself but he wouldn't let me get a word in. Eventually I just hung up on him. I sat on my bed for a while after that. My mom was downstairs and didn't know the call had happened. About an hour later, my mom came to my room and said my dad had been texting her. She showed me some of the messages. He was angry, telling her that I was being disrespectful and that she needed to do a better job raising me. He said I had no appreciation for everything he's done for me. My mom asked me what happened and I told her about the phone call. She sighed and said I shouldn't have sent him that message without talking to her first. She said I made the situation worse. The next day, my dad sent me a voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. When I finally did that evening, his tone was completely different. He wasn't yelling anymore. He said he was sorry for getting angry and that he loves me. He said things have been stressful at work and money is really tight right now. He said he's doing the best he can and he hopes I understand. He ended the message by saying I'm his daughter and he'll always be there for me. The thing is, I don't believe him about the money being tight. Grace posts constantly on social media. Just last week she posted pictures of a shopping trip she took with Layla. They came home with bags from multiple stores. Layla got new clothes, new shoes, and a bunch of makeup. Earlier this month, my dad posted a photo of a new TV they bought for the living room. If money is so tight, how are they affording all of that while my mom has been covering all of my expenses alone for 2 years? After the voicemail, I didn't respond to my dad at all. He didn't try to contact me again either. It's been 3 weeks now and I haven't heard from him. My mom hasn't forced me to visit him but she keeps making comments about how I should reach out and apologize for upsetting him. I haven't apologized because I don't think I did anything wrong. Something else happened that I need to mention. A few days after the phone call with my dad, I was talking to Carlos about college applications. I've been looking at schools in other states, mostly up north. Carlos has been helping me research programs and financial aid options. During one of our conversations, I made a joke about wishing he could just adopt me so I wouldn't have to deal with my dad anymore. I thought Carlos would laugh it off, but instead he got quiet. Later that night, I heard my mom and Carlos talking in their room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop but their voices carried down the hallway. My mom said something about how I had brought up the adoption idea with Carlos. Carlos said he didn't think it was appropriate for him to pursue something like that because my dad is still in the picture, even if he's not doing a great job. He said it would cause too much conflict and he doesn't like confrontation. My mom agreed with him and said it would be too complicated legally anyway. I went back to my room after hearing that. I understand why Carlos feels that way but it still hurt to hear him say it out loud. I know he cares about me but there's a difference between acting like a parent in everyday life and actually taking on that legal responsibility. It made me realize that even though Carlos has been more of a dad to me than my actual dad, it's not something that's ever going to be official. The past few weeks have been strange. I've been focusing on school and my college applications. I've been spending more time on my photography and I've been selling some prints online which has been bringing in a little bit of money. Carlos took me to visit 2 colleges last weekend and my mom came along too. We made a whole day of it, stopped at this diner Carlos likes on the way home. Nobody mentioned my dad the entire day and it was the most relaxed I've felt in months. I know my mom thinks I'm going to regret cutting my dad off. Maybe she's right and this will be something I look back on differently when I'm older. But right now, I can't keep pretending that our relationship is salvageable. He made his choice when he started his new family and decided that I didn't fit into it anymore. I'm just done trying to force myself into a space where I'm clearly not wanted. Update 2: I wasn't planning to post again but something happened last weekend that changed everything. My dad showed up at my mom's house unannounced. It was Saturday morning and I was still in my pajamas eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. My mom answered it and I heard my dad's voice in the hallway. My mom called me to come to the living room. My dad was standing there in jeans and a jacket, looking uncomfortable. He said he wanted to talk to me and suggested we go grab lunch somewhere. My mom looked at me like she expected me to say yes. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to have this conversation in front of my mom, so I agreed. I went upstairs and changed clothes and then got in my dad's car. He drove us to a diner about 10 minutes away. We sat in a booth in the back. My dad ordered coffee and I ordered a soda. For the first few minutes, neither of us said anything. Then my dad started talking. He said he's been thinking about our last conversation and he realizes he didn't handle it well. He said he shouldn't have yelled at me and he's sorry for making me feel like my concerns didn't matter. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. He went on to say that being a parent is hard and there are a lot of things I don't understand yet about managing a household and taking care of multiple kids. He said Grace's kids needed stability after their parents' divorce and he's been trying to create that for them. He said Sophie is still a baby and requires a lot of attention. He said he's been stretched thin trying to keep everything together. I asked him where I fit into all of that. He looked surprised by the question. He said I'm his daughter and I'll always be important to him. I asked him why it didn't feel that way. He didn't have a good answer. He said something vague about how I'm more independent now and don't need him as much as the younger kids do. That's when I brought up the money again. I asked him directly why he stopped paying child support. He got defensive immediately. He said the agreement he had with my mom was informal and not legally binding. He said he's been putting money toward the house and the kids' expenses and there hasn't been enough left over. I pointed out that he just took Grace and all the kids on vacation to the beach 2 weeks ago. I saw the photos on Grace's social media. He said that was a family trip they had been planning for months and had saved up for. I asked him why I wasn't invited on the family trip if I'm part of the family. He didn't have an answer for that either. He said he assumed I wouldn't want to come because I've been avoiding their house. I told him I've been avoiding their house because I don't feel welcome there. He said I'm always welcome and I'm the one making things difficult by refusing to visit. We went in circles like that for a while. He kept trying to turn it around on me, saying I was being stubborn and holding grudges. I kept bringing up specific examples of how he's treated me differently from Grace's kids. The conversation ended with both of us frustrated. He drove me back to my mom's house and didn't say much during the drive. When he dropped me off, he said he hoped I would think about what he said and reconsider keeping my distance. I went inside and my mom asked how it went. I told her it was pointless. She said I should give him credit for trying. I said trying would be actually changing his behavior, not just apologizing and then making excuses. A few days later, something else came up that I feel like I need to include here because it explains a lot about why my dad acts the way he does. I was talking to my aunt on my mom's side, my mom's younger sister who I'm pretty close with. She asked how things were going with my dad and I gave her a brief update. She got quiet for a minute and then asked if my mom had ever told me the real reason she and my dad got divorced. I told her I always assumed they just weren't compatible. My aunt said that was part of it, but the bigger issue was that my dad had cheated on my mom. Apparently when I was 2, my dad went on a trip to visit his brother in another state. He met someone while he was there and had an affair that lasted several months. My mom found out when the other woman contacted her. That's what led to the divorce. I confronted my mom about this that same night. She confirmed it was true. She said she didn't tell me because she didn't want to poison my relationship with my dad. She said what happened between them was between them and didn't have anything to do with me. I asked her why she's been so insistent that I maintain a relationship with him when he treated her so badly. She said people make mistakes and he's still my father regardless of what happened in their marriage. Learning this shifted something for me. All this time I've been trying to understand why my dad is the way he is, and now I have at least part of the answer. He's someone who prioritizes his own wants over the people he's supposed to care about. He did it to my mom and now he's doing it to me. Since that conversation with my aunt, I've noticed other things too. Carlos mentioned once that when he and my mom first started dating, my dad would call and complain about Carlos being around me. My dad apparently told my mom that Carlos shouldn't be acting like my father and it was inappropriate. But now that my dad has his own new family, he doesn't see the hypocrisy in that. I also found out from my mom that my dad used to cancel his weekends with me pretty frequently when I was younger, usually because he had plans with whatever woman he was dating at the time. My mom would rearrange her schedule to accommodate and never made a big deal about it because she didn't want to put me in the middle of their conflict. So even before Grace came into the picture, I wasn't actually his priority. My mom is still resistant to the idea of taking legal action about the child support. She says it would make things messy and she doesn't want the conflict. I asked her why she's protecting him when he's not holding up his end of the agreement. She said it's not about protecting him, it's about keeping things civil for my sake. I told her I'd rather she fought for what we're owed than kept pretending everything is fine. I haven't spoken to my dad since the diner conversation. He's texted me a few times, usually just asking how I'm doing or saying he hopes I'm having a good week. I've responded with short answers. He hasn't pushed for another visit and I haven't offered. I'm focusing on finishing my college applications now. I've narrowed down my list to 5 schools, all of them at least 4 hours away. Carlos has been helping me with the essays and my mom has been researching scholarship opportunities. I'm planning to major in visual arts or communications, something that will let me continue with photography. My dad doesn't know this because he hasn't asked about my plans in months. I turn 18 in 2 months. After that, whatever custody arrangement my parents had won't matter anymore. I'm counting down the days. Update 3. This is going to be my last update because the situation has pretty much resolved itself, or at least reached a point where there's nothing left to say. I'm writing this from my dorm room. I ended up graduating high school a semester early because I had enough credits and I started college in January. I'm about 3 hours away from where I grew up. Carlos helped me move in 2 weeks ago and my mom came too. Isabel, Carlos's daughter, even drove down to help unpack and took me shopping for stuff I needed for my room. Before I get into what happened with my dad, I want to explain how I ended up leaving early. At the beginning of my senior year, my guidance counselor told me I was on track to graduate early if I wanted to. I had taken some extra classes over the summer and had more credits than I needed. She said some students choose to finish in December instead of waiting until May, especially if they're planning to start college right away or take a gap semester to work. I talked to my mom and Carlos about it. My mom was hesitant at first because she said she wanted me to have the full senior year experience, but Carlos pointed out that I've never been that interested in things like prom or senior activities anyway. I've always been more focused on my photography and getting ready for college. We decided it made sense for me to graduate early and start college in the spring semester. It would give me a head start and I could get settled before the bigger freshman class arrives in the fall. I applied to a few schools that accept spring admissions and got into my top choice. The school has a good visual arts program and they offered me a decent financial aid package. My mom is covering part of the cost and I took out some loans for the rest. Carlos offered to help too, but I told him he didn't have to. He insisted on at least buying my textbooks for the first semester. I didn't tell my dad about any of this. He found out in late December when Grace's mom mentioned something to him about seeing my mom's social media post about my early graduation. My dad called my mom and asked why nobody told him. My mom said she assumed I had told him myself. The truth is I didn't tell him because I didn't think he'd care enough to make it an issue. My dad called me after that conversation with my mom. It was the longest phone call we'd had in months. He said he was hurt that I didn't include him in such a big decision. He said he had a right to know what was going on in my life. I asked him when he last asked me about school or college plans. He got quiet. I told him he stopped being involved in my life a long time ago and he doesn't get to be upset now about being left out. He tried to argue that he's been trying to maintain a relationship with me and I'm the one who keeps pulling away. I told him trying would have meant treating me like I mattered over the past 5 years. It would have meant not stopping the child support payments. It would have meant giving me more than the guest room floor to sleep on when I visited. It would have meant asking about my photography or my college applications or literally anything about my life. He said I was being unfair and holding the past against him. I told him the past is all we have because he hasn't given me anything in the present to replace it with. The call ended with him saying he hoped I'd change my mind someday about shutting him out. I told him I wasn't shutting him out, I was just accepting the reality that he already made his choice about where I fit in his priorities. My mom finally decided to take action about the child support after that call. I think hearing my dad try to play the victim when he's the one who walked away from his responsibilities pushed her over the edge. She found the original agreement she and my dad signed and took it to a lawyer. The lawyer told her that even though it was a private agreement, my dad's failure to pay can still be addressed legally. My mom filed paperwork to get the agreement enforced through the court. My dad got served with the papers right after New Year. He called my mom immediately and accused her of trying to ruin him financially. She told him he ruined himself by not honoring the agreement. He said he didn't have the money to pay everything he owes. My mom told him that wasn't her problem to solve. The court date is set for next month. My mom's lawyer thinks she has a strong case. My dad hasn't tried to contact me since then. Grace sent me a message on social media a few days after my dad got served. She said I was tearing the family apart and making things difficult for everyone. She said my dad has been stressed and depressed because of the legal situation and it's affecting his relationship with her kids. She said I should consider how my actions are impacting people. I didn't respond. I blocked her after that. My mom told me last week that my dad's lawyer is trying to negotiate a payment plan. My dad apparently can't afford to pay the full amount he owes up front. The lawyer is proposing that he pay it back in monthly installments over the next 2 years, plus he would resume regular payments now. My mom's lawyer is reviewing the proposal. My mom said she's not interested in dragging this out, but she's also not going to let my dad off easy. Being at college has been good for me. I'm taking classes I actually care about. I've met other people who are into photography and art. My roommate is studying graphic design and we've been working on some projects together. I joined the campus photography club and we go on weekend trips to different locations to shoot. I haven't thought about my dad much since I moved here because I've been busy building my own life. Carlos texts me almost every day to check in. My mom calls twice a week. Isabel came to visit last weekend and we went to this vintage market downtown. She helped me find some old cameras to add to my collection. My mom's sister sent me a care package with snacks and a new notebook. These are the people who show up for me. I don't know what's going to happen with the court case. I don't know if my dad will eventually try to rebuild some kind of relationship with me or if this is just how things are going to be from now on. What I do know is that I'm done waiting for him to act like a father. I'm done making excuses for him or trying to understand his perspective. I'm 18 now and I get to decide who I let into my life and who I keep at a distance. My mom asked me a few days ago if I had any regrets about how things turned out. I told her no. She seemed surprised. She said she thought I'd be sad about losing my relationship with my dad. I told her I lost that relationship years ago, I'm just finally accepting it now. She didn't say anything after that. I'm not writing this because I want advice or because I think things are going to change. I'm writing this because I needed to put it all down somewhere and move on. My dad made his choices and I've made mine. That's all there is to it. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My brother abandoned his 3 daughters for his toxic girlfriend, so I called CPS and took them in. When she finally left him broke and alone, he called me crying and revealed how she had been controlling his life. My brother Lawrence, 39M, has 3 daughters with his ex-wife Alexia, Chandler, 16F, Qley, 14F, and little Ashlyn, 8F. I'm Jessica, 33F, and my husband Tom, 35M, and I have been watching this situation unfold for years. We don't have kids of our own yet, but we've always been close with Lawrence's daughters. Lawrence and Alexia divorced 4 years ago after a messy separation. Alexia moved 3 states away for work and only sees the girls during summer breaks and some holidays. Lawrence got primary custody, which seemed fine at first. He had a decent job at a manufacturing plant and seemed committed to raising the girls. The problem started about 2 years ago when Lawrence began dating Angela, 42F. Angela has 2 sons from her previous marriage, Gunnar, 19M, and Devin, 15M. At first, everything seemed normal. The girls liked Angela well enough, and her boys were polite when they visited. Things changed when Lawrence and Angela moved in together last year. Angela's sons moved in full-time, and suddenly the dynamics in the house shifted completely. Lawrence started spending most of his free time with Angela and her boys. He would take them to baseball games, help Devin with his car projects, and generally act like the father figure Gunnar and Devin never had. Meanwhile, Chandler and Qley started complaining that their dad barely talked to them anymore. When they tried to show him their school projects or talk about their day, he would brush them off or tell them he was busy with something else. Ashlyn, being only 8, didn't understand why Daddy suddenly didn't have time for their weekend pancake breakfasts or bedtime stories. The situation got worse when Angela started making household rules. She decided the girls were too old to need help with homework and should be more independent. She also thought they were spoiled and needed more chores. Suddenly, Chandler and Qley were responsible for most of the cleaning, including doing laundry for everyone in the house, while Gunnar and Devin barely had any responsibilities. When Chandler tried to talk to Lawrence about this, he told her that Angela was just trying to help them become more mature. He said Alexia had babied them too much and Angela was teaching them life skills. Chandler came to our house crying after that conversation, saying she felt like her dad didn't care about her anymore. Tom and I started having the girls over more often on weekends. They would arrive looking exhausted and stressed. Chandler had dark circles under her eyes from staying up late doing everyone's laundry and helping Qley with homework since no one else would. Qley had started getting stomach aches every morning before school. Even little Ashlyn seemed withdrawn and would cling to me when it was time to go home. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago. Chandler called me at work, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She said Lawrence had kicked her and Qley out of the house. When I asked what happened, she explained that Angela had accused them of being disrespectful and ungrateful. Apparently, Qley had asked why she had to clean Gunnar's room when he was 19 and perfectly capable of doing it himself. Angela told Lawrence that his daughters were undermining her authority and making her sons uncomfortable in their own home. Lawrence sided with Angela completely. He told Chandler and Qley they could either follow Angela's rules without question or find somewhere else to live. When Chandler pointed out that they were minors and had nowhere to go, Lawrence said that was their choice to make. He gave them 1 hour to pack their things. The girls called me from a friend's house that night. Chandler was trying to hold it together, but I could hear the panic in her voice. She said they had been staying with different friends for the past few days, but couldn't keep doing that forever. Qley was barely eating and had missed 3 days of school. They were too embarrassed to tell anyone what had really happened. I drove over immediately and picked them up. When I called Lawrence to tell him his daughters were safe at my house, he seemed relieved rather than concerned. He said maybe some time apart would help everyone cool down and that the girls would come crawling back when they realized how good they had it. That was 6 weeks ago. Chandler and Qley have been living with Tom and me ever since. We enrolled them in the local high school, and they've been doing well academically. Chandler got a part-time job at a grocery store and insists on paying us rent, even though we've told her it's not necessary. Qley joined the school's art club and seems more relaxed than I've seen her in months. The problem is little Ashlyn. She's still living with Lawrence and Angela, but the few times I've seen her, she seems different. She's quieter, more anxious. Last weekend when we picked her up for a visit, she asked if she could stay with us too. When I asked why, she said the house was too loud now and that Angela's boys were mean to her when no one was looking. She wouldn't give me specifics, but she had a bruise on her arm that she claimed came from falling off her bike. I talked to Chandler about it, and she said Gunnar and Devin had always been rough with Ashlyn when the adults weren't around. Nothing serious enough to leave marks, just pushing her around and taking her toys. But she's worried it's getting worse now that she and Jolie aren't there to watch out for their little sister. Lawrence has visited Chandler and Jolie exactly twice in 6 weeks. Both times, he spent most of the visit lecturing them about being more grateful and mature. He hasn't asked about their grades, their new school, or how they're adjusting. He did mention that Angela thinks they're probably talking badly about her to us and poisoning Ashlyn against the family. Yesterday, I found out that Lawrence hasn't been sending any money for Chandler and Jolie's expenses. Tom and I have been covering everything: food, clothes, school supplies, Chandler's work uniforms. When I called Lawrence about it, he said he wasn't going to reward their bad behavior by paying for them to live elsewhere. He said if they wanted his support, they could come home and apologize to Angela. This is where I might be the problem. I told Lawrence that if he didn't start taking care of his daughters properly, I would call Child Protective Services. I said abandoning 2 minor children was neglect, and I was worried about Ashlyn's safety too. Lawrence exploded and said I was threatening to destroy his family over teenage drama. He said CPS would laugh at me because the girls chose to leave and he wasn't stopping them from coming home. Now my whole family is involved. My parents think I'm overreacting and that teenage girls are naturally dramatic. They say Lawrence is doing his best to blend 2 families and that's always difficult. My sister agrees with them and says I'm being too protective because I don't have kids of my own. Even Tom's parents think we should stay out of it and let Lawrence handle his own children. But I can't stop thinking about Chandler working after school to buy her own clothes because her father won't support her. I can't stop worrying about Jolie having panic attacks before school because she's afraid of running into classmates who might ask about her living situation. And I'm terrified about what might be happening to Ashlyn in that house with no one to protect her. Lawrence called me this morning and said I had 1 week to bring Chandler and Jolie home or he would report them as runaways. He said he's done playing games and that I'm enabling their disrespectful behavior. He also said if I call CPS, he'll make sure they know I'm keeping his children from him against his will. So here I am, asking strangers on the internet for advice because everyone in my real life thinks I'm wrong. Am I overreacting? Should I call CPS or would that make things worse for all 3 girls? These are my nieces, and I love them, but I don't know if I'm helping or making everything more complicated. The girls don't want to go back. Chandler has already started looking at colleges and working toward financial independence. Jolie is finally sleeping through the night again. But I'm scared about what calling authorities might mean for Ashlyn, who's still so young and completely dependent on Lawrence. What would you do in my situation? Update 1: I posted 3 weeks ago about my brother Lawrence abandoning his teenage daughters Chandler and Jolie, and threatening to call CPS. A lot has happened since then, and I need to update you all because some of you were really helpful with advice. First, thank you to everyone who told me to document everything and contact CPS immediately. You were right. I was so worried about family drama that I wasn't thinking clearly about what was best for the girls. The day after my original post, Lawrence followed through on his threat to report Chandler and Jolie as runaways. 2 police officers showed up at our door that evening asking about the girls. I showed them my text messages with Lawrence from the day he kicked them out, including the one where he said it was their choice to find somewhere else to live. The officers were pretty understanding and said it sounded like a family dispute rather than a runaway situation, but they had to file a report. That night, I called the CPS hotline. The intake worker was incredibly helpful and walked me through everything I needed to document. She said the fact that Lawrence had kicked out 2 minors and refused to provide financial support was definitely worth investigating. She also took detailed notes about my concerns regarding Ashlyn. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from various family members. Apparently, Lawrence had called everyone after the police visited him to follow up on the runaway report. He was furious that I had involved authorities and told everyone I was trying to steal his children and destroy his relationship with Angela. My mother called me crying, saying I was tearing the family apart over something that should be handled privately. My father left a voicemail saying I was being vindictive because I was jealous that Lawrence had found happiness with Angela. Even my usually supportive sister said I had gone too far and needed to bring the girls home immediately. But something interesting happened during all those family phone calls. My Aunt Carol, who lives about an hour away, called me separately. She said she'd been worried about Lawrence's daughters for months but didn't want to get involved in family business. She told me that at the last family barbecue, she'd watched Angela's son Devin deliberately trip Ashlyn while the adults were busy talking. When Ashlyn started crying, Devin told her she was being a baby and needed to toughen up. Carol also said she'd noticed that Lawrence barely interacted with his daughters during the entire gathering, while Angela's boys got all his attention. Carol offered to help however she could and said she would testify to CPS if needed. It was such a relief to have at least one family member who saw what I was seeing. The CPS caseworker came to our house 4 days after I made the report. She interviewed Chandler and Jolie separately, and I was honestly shocked by some of the things they told her that they hadn't told me. Chandler revealed that Angela had been going through their personal belongings, including reading Chandler's diary and Jolie's text messages. Angela had also been making comments about their mother Alexia, calling her a bad parent and saying the girls were damaged because of her abandonment. Qley told the caseworker that Angela's sons had been increasingly aggressive toward them in the months before they were kicked out. Devin had cornered Qley in the laundry room once and told her she needed to stay out of his family's business. Gunnar had started taking their possessions without asking and would refuse to give them back, saying they were spoiled and didn't deserve nice things. The caseworker also interviewed Ashlyn separately when she visited Lawrence's house. I don't know everything that was discussed, but I do know that Ashlyn disclosed some concerning information about the household dynamics and her interactions with Angela's sons. Lawrence was livid after the CPS visit. He called me screaming that I had traumatized his 8-year-old daughter by having strangers interrogate her. He said Ashlyn had been crying for hours after the caseworker left and that Angela was threatening to leave him if this continued. He accused me of coaching Chandler and Qley to lie to authorities and said he would sue me for alienation of affection. That's when Angela called me directly for the first time. She was surprisingly calm, which was almost scarier than if she had been yelling. She told me I had no idea what I was dealing with and that I was about to destroy a lot of lives over my need to play hero. She said Chandler and Qley were manipulative teenagers who had been poisoning everyone against her from day one, and that I was falling for their act. Then she said something that really bothered me. She told me that Lawrence's ex-wife Alexia had been just like his daughters, always playing victim and making Angela out to be the villain. She said some women just couldn't handle strong, independent women who knew how to run a household properly. The way she talked about Alexia made me realize she saw Lawrence's daughters as extensions of their mother rather than as individuals who deserved love and care. 2 days later, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Alexia, Lawrence's ex-wife. She was calling from her new state, crying and apologetic. She said she had just gotten off the phone with Chandler, who had finally told her mother everything that had been happening. Alexia revealed that she had been trying to get more custody of the girls for over a year, but Lawrence had been fighting her in court. He claimed she was an unfit mother because she had moved away for work, and his lawyer had convinced the judge that the girls were better off staying in their home state with their father. Alexia had been saving money for a better lawyer, but the legal process was slow and expensive. What really surprised me was that Alexia had been sending Lawrence money every month for the girls' expenses, thinking he was taking proper care of them. She had no idea they were doing all the household chores or that Angela's sons were being aggressive toward them. She definitely didn't know that Lawrence had kicked them out. Alexia immediately contacted her lawyer and filed an emergency motion for custody. She also offered to take all 3 girls, including Ashlyn, if the courts would allow it. She said she had a stable job now in a 2-bedroom apartment, and she could have the girls enrolled in school within a week. Lawrence found out about Alexia's legal action and completely lost it. He showed up at our house at 11 p.m., pounding on the door and demanding to see his daughters. Tom answered the door and told him to leave, but Lawrence pushed past him into our living room. Chandler and Qley came downstairs to see what the commotion was about, and Lawrence started yelling at them about betraying their family and destroying his relationship. He told Chandler she was just like her mother, selfish and manipulative. He said Qley was weak and couldn't handle normal family responsibilities. Then he looked at both of them and said they were no longer his daughters if they continued living with us and talking to their mother. Tom had to physically escort Lawrence out of the house while I called the police. By the time officers arrived, Lawrence was sitting in his car in our driveway, crying. The officers told him he needed to leave and couldn't come back without permission. They also documented the incident, which I'm sure will be helpful for the CPS case and Alexia's custody battle. The girls were shaken but not surprised by their father's behavior. Chandler said it was exactly what she expected, that he would choose Angela over his own children when forced to pick a side. Qley said she was done trying to have a relationship with him and just wanted to live with their mother. 3 days ago, we had the first court hearing for emergency custody. I testified about what I had witnessed and provided copies of all my text messages with Lawrence. Chandler and Qley also spoke to the judge privately. The judge granted Alexia temporary custody of all 3 girls and ordered that they could remain with Tom and me until Alexia could arrange to have them move to her state. Lawrence was ordered to attend parenting classes and undergo a psychological evaluation before any future custody decisions are made. He was also required to pay child support retroactively for the time the girls have been living with us. The CPS investigation is still ongoing, but the caseworker told me they found enough concerns to keep the case open. She couldn't give me details, but she said Ashlyn would be much better off living with her mother and sisters. Ashlyn was brought to our house yesterday for the transition. She was confused and scared at first, but when she saw Chandler and Qley, she ran to them and wouldn't let go. She kept asking if she really got to stay with her sisters and if Angela's boys couldn't hurt her anymore. Alexia is driving here this weekend to pick up all 3 girls. She's been calling them every day, and you can see the relief on their faces when they talk to her. She's not perfect, but she's their mother and she wants them with her. My family is barely speaking to me now. My parents say I've destroyed Lawrence's life and broken up his new family. They claim I was jealous of his happiness and used his children as weapons against him. My sister said I've caused irreparable damage to family relationships and that I'll regret my actions when the girls become adults and realize what I took away from them. But Chandler got her first paycheck from her job yesterday and handed it to me, saying she wanted to contribute to the household expenses for these last few weeks. Qley showed me a drawing she made of our family, including Tom and me as her aunt and uncle who saved her and her sisters. And little Ashlyn fell asleep on my lap last night while we watched a movie, something she hadn't been able to do in months according to her sisters. I think I made the right choice, even if it cost me my relationship with most of my family. Update 2. It's been about 6 weeks since my last update, and I wanted to let you know how things have been going with Chandler, Qley, and Ashlyn since they moved to live with their mother Alexia. The girls have been thriving with Alexia. Chandler started her senior year at a new high school and is already involved in student government. She's working part-time at a local bookstore and has been accepted to 2 colleges so far. Qley joined the drama club at her new school and landed a supporting role in their fall play. Little Ashlyn has been seeing a school counselor to help her adjust, but Alexia says she's sleeping better and has made several friends in her new class. Alexia calls me every week to update me on how the girls are doing and to thank me for taking care of them. She's been incredibly grateful and has repeatedly said she had no idea how bad things had gotten with Lawrence and Angela. The girls video call Tom and me every Sunday, and they seem genuinely happy in their new life. But that's not really why I'm writing this update. Something happened 3 weeks ago that I need to tell you about because it explains a lot about Lawrence's behavior and why our family was so resistant to my involvement. I got a call from Carol, my aunt who had supported me during the CPS investigation. She asked if I could meet her for coffee because she had something important to tell me about Lawrence and Angela. I thought maybe she had heard something about how Lawrence was doing after losing custody, so I agreed to meet. What Carol told me changed my entire understanding of the situation. She had been doing some digging after the custody hearing because something about Angela bothered her. Carol works in social services in her county, so she has access to certain databases that regular people don't. It turns out Angela has a history. Her first marriage ended when her ex-husband got full custody of Gunnar and Devin after documenting that Angela had been emotionally abusing them and their half-sister from his previous relationship. The court record showed a pattern of Angela creating conflict between her stepchildren and their biological parent, then positioning herself as the victim when the situation exploded. But here's the part that really shocked me. Angela had been married twice before Lawrence. Her second marriage also ended in divorce after her husband's teenage daughter from his first marriage ran away from home and contacted child services about Angela's treatment of her. That girl had also ended up living with relatives while her father chose Angela over his own child. Carol found all this through professional channels, but what she told me next came from our own family. She had confronted my parents about why they were so determined to support Lawrence and Angela despite obvious signs that the girls were being mistreated. My mother broke down and admitted that Angela had been feeding the family information for months. Angela had been calling my parents, my sister, and other relatives, telling them that Lawrence's daughters were troubled kids who were acting out because they couldn't accept their father's new relationship. She painted herself as a patient stepmother trying to help difficult children while being undermined by their jealous relatives. Angela had specifically told my family that I was unstable because Tom and I couldn't have children of our own, and that I was trying to steal Lawrence's daughters to fill that void. She convinced them that Chandler and Qley were manipulating me with sob stories because they knew I was desperate to be needed. My parents believed Angela completely. They thought they were protecting Lawrence from my interference and helping him build a stable blended family. My sister admitted she had been talking to Angela regularly and giving her updates on what I was saying about the situation. I was devastated. Not only had Angela been systematically isolating Lawrence from his daughters, but she had been manipulating my entire family to ensure they would support her version of events. She had turned my own parents against me to prevent anyone from questioning what was happening to Chandler, Qley, and Ashlyn. Carol also revealed that Angela had convinced Lawrence to stop paying child support to Alexia months before the girls were kicked out. Angela told him that Alexia was living comfortably in her new state and didn't need his money, and that he should be investing in his new family instead. That's why Alexia had been struggling financially and couldn't afford a better lawyer sooner. When I confronted my parents about this, they were defensive at first. My father said Angela had seemed genuinely concerned about the family dynamics and was just trying to help everyone understand the situation from Lawrence's perspective. My mother insisted that Angela had never said anything bad about me personally, just that I seemed overly invested in the children. But when I pressed them for details about their conversations with Angela, some inconsistencies started to emerge. Angela had told my mother that Chandler was failing in school and getting into trouble, when Chandler was actually maintaining a 3.8 GPA. She told my father that Qley was being violent toward Angela's sons, when Qley is one of the gentlest people I know. She claimed that Ashlyn was perfectly happy at home and that I was projecting my own issues onto the situation. All of these things were demonstrably false, but my parents had never thought to verify Angela's claims with me or with the girls themselves. They had simply accepted her narrative and acted accordingly. My sister was the hardest to confront because she had been actively working against me based on Angela's manipulation. She had been reporting back to Angela about my concerns and my plans to involve CPS. She had also been encouraging my parents to pressure me to return the girls to Lawrence. When I asked her why she trusted Angela more than her own sister, she broke down crying. She said Angela had seemed so reasonable and concerned, and that Lawrence had seemed truly happy for the first time since his divorce. She thought I was being dramatic and that teenage girls always exaggerate problems with stepmothers. The worst part was learning that Angela had been planning this manipulation from the beginning. Carol found out that Angela had researched our family before she even started dating Lawrence. She knew about my struggles with infertility and had specifically targeted that vulnerability to turn my family against me if I ever tried to interfere with her plans. Lawrence apparently has no idea about Angela's history or her manipulation of our family. When Carol tried to talk to him about it, he accused her of being jealous like everyone else and said Angela had warned him that family members might try to sabotage their relationship with lies and accusations. Carol believes that Lawrence is also being emotionally manipulated by Angela, but he's so isolated now that he can't see it clearly. He's lost custody of his daughters, alienated most of his family, and is completely dependent on Angela for emotional support. She has him exactly where she wants him. My parents have apologized and said they realize they were manipulated, but the damage to our relationship feels pretty permanent. They spent months dismissing my concerns and supporting someone who was actively harming their granddaughters. Even though they were deceived, they chose to believe the worst about me rather than trust their own daughter. My sister is devastated by her role in everything. She wants to rebuild our relationship, but I'm having trouble trusting her again. She passed along sensitive information to someone who used it to harm children, and she did it because she believed I was the problem. The good news is that the CPS investigation concluded with findings that supported all my concerns. Lawrence has been required to complete parenting classes and undergo counseling before he can have any unsupervised contact with Ashlyn. Alexia was awarded full custody of all 3 girls with no visitation rights for Lawrence until he completes his court-ordered requirements. Angela has apparently been pushing Lawrence to appeal the custody decision and fight for his parental rights. But his lawyer told him that with his CPS history and the documented abandonment of Chandler and Qley, he has almost no chance of regaining custody. The lawyer recommended that Lawrence focus on rebuilding relationships with his daughters rather than fighting legal battles he can't win. Lawrence hasn't attempted to contact the girls since they moved with Alexia. I don't know if that's because Angela is preventing it or because he's given up on being their father. Either way, the girls seem relieved not to have that stress hanging over them. Tom and I are doing well, though this whole experience has been emotionally exhausting. We're considering moving closer to Alexia and the girls so we can maintain our relationship with them more easily. Chandler wants us to be at her high school graduation, and Qley has asked if we'll come see her in the school play. I still think I made the right choice in calling CPS and supporting the girls, but I never expected to discover that my entire family had been manipulated by someone with a history of destroying relationships between parents and their children. It makes me wonder how many other families Angela has damaged and whether Lawrence will ever realize what he's lost. Update 3. This will be my final update because the situation has reached a conclusion of sorts, though not the one I expected when I first posted about my brother Lawrence and his daughters. Chandler graduated high school last month with honors and will be starting college in the fall. She received several scholarships and won't need to take out loans for her first year. Qley is thriving in her new school and was elected to student council. Ashlyn has adjusted completely to living with Alexia and rarely mentions her father or Angela anymore. All 3 girls are doing well in therapy and have built strong relationships with their mother. Alexia got a promotion at work and was able to move into a larger apartment so each girl has her own room. She's also been dating someone new, a man who has been incredibly patient with the girls and doesn't try to rush into a parental role. The girls like him because he treats them as individuals and doesn't expect them to instantly accept him as family. Tom and I did end up moving closer to them. We found jobs in their city and bought a house about 20 minutes from Alexia's apartment. We see the girls regularly, and they often stay with us on weekends. It feels natural and comfortable, like extended family should. But the real reason for this final update is to tell you what happened with Lawrence and Angela, because it validates everything I suspected about her motives and methods. 2 months ago, I got a call from Lawrence. I almost didn't answer because we hadn't spoken since the custody hearing, but something made me pick up. He was crying and could barely form coherent sentences. At first, I thought something had happened to him physically, but eventually I understood that Angela had left him. The story came out in pieces over several phone calls. Apparently, Angela had been systematically isolating Lawrence from everyone in his life, not just his daughters and our family, but also his friends and coworkers. She convinced him to quit his job at the manufacturing plant because his supervisor was supposedly undermining their relationship by asking about his daughters. She got him to cut ties with his longtime friends because they were allegedly jealous of his happiness. Angela also convinced Lawrence to take out loans and credit cards to pay for improvements to her house and for her son's expenses. Gunnar wanted a car, so Lawrence co-signed for a loan. Devin needed money for community college, so Lawrence paid his tuition. Angela wanted to renovate the kitchen, so Lawrence took out a home equity loan against the house he had shared with Alexia and the girls. By the time Angela left, Lawrence was deeply in debt and completely isolated. She took her sons and moved to another state to be with a man she had been seeing behind Lawrence's back. She cleaned out their joint bank account and left Lawrence with all the debt they had accumulated together. Lawrence called me because he literally had no one else left. His friends had stopped reaching out after he repeatedly canceled plans to spend time with Angela. His coworkers thought he was unstable after he quit his job abruptly. Our parents were hurt and confused by his behavior over the past year and had stopped trying to maintain a relationship with him. When I asked Lawrence why he was calling me specifically, he said he finally understood what I had been trying to tell him about Angela. He found out that she had been monitoring his phone and computer, screening his calls, and intercepting messages from the girls and from our family. He discovered that Chandler had been trying to contact him for months, but Angela had been deleting her messages and blocking her number. Lawrence also found evidence that Angela had been planning to leave him from the beginning. She had been transferring money into accounts he didn't know about and had been in contact with her new boyfriend for over 6 months. She had used Lawrence's credit to make purchases that she then sold online, pocketing the cash for her escape fund. The most heartbreaking part was when Lawrence told me he had found copies of letters that Chandler and Qley had written to him over the past year. Angela had been intercepting their mail and hiding it from him. The girls had been trying to maintain a relationship with their father, sending him updates about school and asking if they could visit. Angela had thrown away dozens of letters and cards, including handmade birthday and Christmas gifts. Lawrence begged me to help him contact his daughters. He wanted to explain what had happened and apologize for choosing Angela over them. He was sobbing as he told me how much he missed them and how he realized he had thrown away the most important relationships in his life for a woman who never cared about him at all. I told Lawrence I would talk to the girls, but I couldn't promise they would want to see him. They had been rebuilding their lives without him for almost a year, and they were happy and stable. I wasn't going to push them into a relationship they didn't want just because their father was finally ready to be a parent again. I talked to Alexia first, explaining what Lawrence had told me and asking how she thought the girls would react. Alexia was sympathetic but protective. She said the girls were doing so well that she didn't want to disrupt their progress, but she also thought they deserved to know that their father had been manipulated and lied to. Chandler's response was the most direct. She said she appreciated knowing that her father hadn't chosen to ignore her letters, but that didn't change the fact that he had kicked her and Qley out of his house when they needed him most. She said Angela might have been manipulating him, but he had still made the choice to believe her over his own daughters. Chandler told me she wasn't ready to have a relationship with Lawrence and might never be. Qley was more conflicted. She wanted to believe that their father loved them but had been deceived, but she was also angry about everything they had gone through. She agreed to exchange letters with Lawrence through Alexia as a mediator, but she wasn't ready for phone calls or visits. Ashlyn's reaction surprised everyone. When Alexia told her that Daddy wanted to talk to her, Ashlyn said she already had a family and didn't need him anymore. She said she remembered being scared at Daddy's house but felt safe with Mommy and her sisters. At 8 years old, she had already moved on emotionally. Lawrence was devastated by the girls' responses, but he said he understood and would wait as long as it took for them to trust him again. He started attending therapy and working to rebuild his life without Angela. He got a new job and is slowly paying off the debt she left him with. 3 weeks ago, Lawrence asked if he could attend Chandler's graduation. Alexia talked to Chandler about it, and Chandler agreed to let him come as long as he sat separately and didn't try to approach her afterward. Lawrence came to the ceremony and cried when Chandler's name was called. He left immediately afterward without trying to talk to any of us. Chandler told me later that seeing him there meant something to her, even though she wasn't ready to forgive him. She said it showed her that he was finally prioritizing his daughters over his own comfort, which was what she had needed from him all along. I don't know if Lawrence will ever rebuild relationships with his daughters. The damage runs deep, and they're all in different places emotionally. Chandler might never forgive him completely. Qley seems open to the possibility of a relationship someday, but on her terms. Ashlyn has a new life and doesn't seem to need him anymore. What I do know is that I made the right choice in protecting those girls when their father wouldn't. They're happy, healthy, and building their own futures now. They have people in their lives who put their needs first and support their dreams. Lawrence lost everything because he chose a manipulative woman over his children, but his daughters didn't lose anything except a parent who had already abandoned them emotionally. They gained independence, self-respect, and the knowledge that they deserved better treatment than what they were getting. Tom and I are closer than ever to Chandler, Qley, and Ashlyn. We're part of their chosen family now, and that relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation. When Chandler graduates college, when Qley gets her first job, when Ashlyn takes her first steps into adulthood, we'll be there celebrating with them. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you relationships with people who matter to you. But sometimes it helps you build even stronger relationships with people who matter more. I lost my brother, but I gained 3 incredible young women who trust me to have their backs when things get tough.